All right, so electronic drums part two. Welcome back to the series, and thank you so much for taking the time to stop by and watch the videos. Part one, we kind of talked about the drum set. This is a TD30 Roland TD30K electronic drum set. As I mentioned in an earlier video, I played the TD11K set. I essentially converted it myself to a TD11KV, and then made the plunge and bought the TD30K drum set. And altogether, I think I played the TD11s for right about a year, and I've had this drum set for coming up on 6 months. I bought it in August, and it's February now, so I've had it for right about 6 months. Really enjoy the drum set. In my mind, as I alluded to earlier, I had been historically an acoustic drum set player. I still play acoustic drums. I play acoustic drums and electric drums. The three primary gigs, I guess you could say, that I have is I play drums at my church. I have rejoined a group of friends that I played in a band with for years, and we play together. And then I've also joined a new group of friends, and I play with them. So essentially, 3 gigs. And I've got to say that for the most part, I use acoustic drums exclusively in all 3 of those settings. So what's the place for electronic drums? And as I've said many times before in other videos, this is an opinion video, so this is my opinion. I think there's 3 things basically. There's practice, there's recording, and there's playing. Electronic drums, in my mind, are an excellent practice tool. Now, there's another YouTuber whom I am subscribed to, and I think a lot of. I think his content is really good. I want to say his name is Stephen Clark, and he recently made a video that he said, basically saying, do not practice on electronic drums. And when I first saw that video, I of course I had to watch, because it basically went counter to something that I was doing. And so I did go in and watch, and initially, I'm not going to say that I agreed with him. I'm not going to say that I disagreed with him. I think that it kind of led me to go and kind of ponder some things. And I know that Justin Greenwalt on 65 Drums went in and did a rebuttal video, and basically said that you should be practicing on electronic drums, and gave some very valid reasons why. And some other people in the electronic drumming community kind of came forward, and some people basically were for it, and other people were like, yeah, I mean, there really are some limitations with electronic drums. So all that being said, with all these opinions floating around, I figure I'll throw my 2 cents in the ring. And I'll say this: I think that electronic drums are a great practice tool, but and I think that this kind of goes a little bit to Stephen Clark's point here, is I've got this module over here, and I've got faders on the front, and I can basically play as hard as I am comfortable playing, or as soft, or what. I can basically play however I want, and I can sit here and mix via the faders, and make certain things louder and certain things softer, and by all means, I do to some degree do that. But one of the drawbacks to that is I'm kind of losing my sense of feeling and quote unquote dynamics, and maybe dynamic independence, where there are certain sections in a song where you need to kind of lay back on the hi-hats a little bit, and so that you would use technique and actually play the hi-hat softer, or the ride pattern softer, or whatever. And then there's other points in the song where you may play it more aggressively, or you may, I say all that to say that I think that what goes on with a drum module is good, but in some ways it masks a little bit of what's really going on. So, and he even suggests, if you do use an electronic drum set, just to turn the module off. And I think he makes an excellent point there, in that I think that when I spend a lot of time playing electric drums, which I do spend a lot of time playing electric drums, and then when I transition back to acoustic drums, one of the things that I notice is that I've lost a little bit of my dynamic independence, where I can make one limb firmer or harder, and the other limb play a little bit softer at the same time, and keep all that together and keep that in time. And so if you're gonna play electronic drums, sometimes it behooves you to just turn the module way down or turn it off and just play the pads and listen to the pads and try to play things maybe in a little bit more of a musical way, much like you would with a practice pad or with a drum or something like that. Now, as far as the rebound and whether it has too much rebound or too little rebound, you know, I mean, that you're kind of opening a big can of worms there. But anyhow, I say all that to say, my take is this: electronic drums, you know, they're here to stay. They've really come a long ways. They're going a long ways. They are here to stay, and they're an excellent tool, and they should be used. They should be used as that. Now, they're not a replacement for acoustic drums, but they are something maybe to be used in addition to acoustic drums. Maybe you can play hybrid, or maybe you can warm up with them or practice with them, or there's different things. So there's the practicing aspect, and then there's also the recording aspect. And I know that I in the earlier video, I got into my drum cover technique and exactly how it is that I record my drum covers and using the iRig. So basically, here it is in a nutshell. This little device, and as I explained earlier, it's got a piece of blue tape on it just that I know that it's the one that's actually working. This is actually, if I understand correctly, it's a device for guitar players, and it's a way for a guitar player to plug their guitar into their iPhone or iPad and turn that into an amp and use that as a practicing device. And basically, I'm using that device, and once again, I got this from Justin Rewald on 65 Drums. I'm using this device. It's got an 1/8" input here. I plug an 1/8" cable directly into that, and then, I'm sorry, 1/4 inch. It's not really dyslexic when you get your numbers screwed up. I don't know what it is. It's just silly. But anyhow, 1/4 inch in and 1/8" out, and that goes into my iPad, and I record directly into my iPad, and I record directly into my iPad. It's one file. It's audio and video. There's no issues with syncing because it's all one deal. Upsides to that is it's very simple. It's very easy to do. It's very quick. Downsides are I don't have the ability to go back and remix something or re-edit something. I do have a little bit of editing capability, but as far as like remixing it or whatever, that's kind of off the table. As far as the results, I think it produces decent results. I would have to say that it's probably somewhere in the ballpark of a 6 on a 10 scale. There's another YouTuber out there whom I'm subscribed to and watch a lot of his content and think a lot of his channel. That's a guy named Mike Luke, and Mike is an excellent drummer. In addition to that, I would have to say that Mike really is kind of has the mind of an engineer, and he uses something called VSTs. He's not using the iRig at all. You have to watch his videos and kind of go more down that road in order to understand exactly what's going on. But he's basically just using the MIDI data that from triggering the drums or from playing the drums to trigger software to produce the sounds, and he has ultimate control over his mixing. And I know a lot of guys that are using the electronic drums for drum covers, they're going that route, and there's no doubt, and there's absolutely no doubt whatsoever, that produces a better result, hands down. That being said, I'm not really willing to go that far at this point, and buy the software and do all that stuff. That's just not the position that I'm in at this point. I'm trying to keep all my stuff really simple and straightforward. Like I say, I straight from the module into the iRig, into the iPad. I go into an app called iMovie and chop off the beginning and chop off the end, so you don't see me getting up and sitting down. I think if you go all the way back to my very first couple of drum covers, they weren't edited at all. They were just basically I walked into a room and started playing. But yeah, like I say, I'm using the iMovie application to chop off the ends, put a color filter on there, and maybe throw a picture at the beginning and put a label on it. That's essentially it. So, my opinion, electronic drums, there's practicing, there's recording, and I think that these are great tools for those things. Now in addition to that, there's also There's also playing electronic drums with bands. And I think there's some really, I think that has a very promising future. I, like a lot of drummers, play the drums very, very, very loud. And that's okay and all, don't get me wrong. But there comes a little bit of a problem with that, in that if you're a loud drummer, like I am and like a lot of guys are, and let's face it, drums are a loud instrument, you're going to drive the stage volume of your band up. The guitar players, the bass player, keyboard players, all these people are going to turn their amps up basically to keep pace with the volume that your drums are producing. And that's going to result in using a PA for vocals, obviously, and possibly using a sound man to run that PA, and they're going to have to really work on the monitor mix and try to get a monitor mix where the singer can hear himself or herself sing, so that they can harmonize and all this, that, and the other. And so you've got this big, huge wall of sound on stage, and you're, I mean, it's basically like a big war. I mean, you play loud, and everybody else turns up, and then the sound man has to adjust, and then the guitar player turns up a little bit more, and so you play a little harder, and it's just like this big tug of war that goes on all night long. And at the end of the day, the singers are the ones that suffer, because they're basically screaming their lungs out, and they're trying to sing, and the point, what they're contributing to the music is probably one of the absolute most important aspects of the music. So I say all that to say, I think there's a future for electronic drumming at the club level, where you can help to use this tool to control your stage volume and hopefully bring the war down a little bit, and bring the volume down, and have a little bit more control, and your singer's not blowing their lungs out and everybody's ears aren't bleeding. So I'm going to get a little bit into the whole live aspect and some things that I've seen and I've found, and basically some of my experiences on. Okay, so I've got two speakers set up here. One is a Simmons 50 watt amp, 50 watt drum amp, and the other is a Yamaha DRB 15. This is essentially a PA speaker. Now, when I first got my electronic drums, when I got the TD11K kit, I had absolutely no idea what I was doing or what I was getting into. So I didn't even really consider the whole headphone aspect. I just went down this road of, I'm going to have some way of hearing this. So I bought this DA50, the Simmons DA50 50 watt drum amp speaker. And I brought it home, and I played with it a little bit at home. And eventually, as I got more adventurous, I took my TD11K drum set to band practice, and I brought this Simmons DA50 50 watt speaker. I do not recommend this product at all. This Simmons DA50 speaker, it's the quality, the sound quality is not that great. I just do not recommend the product. The thing that I've found with the whole drum amp, drum speaker type of situation is it's not necessarily a matter of you need the speaker to be really, really loud, so much as you need the speaker to be able to handle a great deal of, or to be able to produce a great deal of body. I mean, if you stand back and think about your drum set from simulating a 22, 24, 26 inch kick drum, up to a 16, 18 inch floor tom and other toms, and your snare drum and your cymbals, and just that wide dynamic, that wide frequency range that you've got, you need speakers that, good quality speakers that can kind of give that body, that depth to the sound. Now, there's kind of an in-between point, because quite frankly, if you're going to take an electronic drum set and go play a gig on a relatively good-sized stage, odds are there's going to be a PA system, and there's going to be a sound man, and you're basically going to plug into the PA, and life is going to be good. And oh, by the way, I don't have one of these here, but if you're in that scenario, I would highly recommend, at least with this setup, to use something called a direct box, and basically you want to use a direct box. You've got 1/4 inch outs on your on your on your module, and you want to run that into a direct box before it goes into the cable snake to go to the PA, because you want to transfer that sound from 1/4 inch to XLR cables, or I'm probably saying this wrong. You want to get away from the 1/4 inch cable, because the longer that goes, the weaker the signal gets and the more distorted it gets. Whereas if you use the direct box, you're going to produce a better quality sound to send to the sound man. So anyhow, I digress. So if you're in that situation where you're playing on a stage, then that's probably what you're going to have is a big PA and a sound man, and as long as you have the drum set and the brain and a direct box and your cables, you're good to go. If you're sitting here in your bedroom or in your house or in your office or whatever, you're probably playing to yourself. You're going to use headphones. You don't need anybody else to hear what's going on. And what I've got here is the Sennheiser HD280 Pros, and that's what I've been using for probably about the last year, and that's an excellent headphone set that I use when I'm doing my drum covers, when I'm practicing, when I'm playing my electronic drums at home. Where do you get into this thing where you need a monitor or you need a speaker or something like that? Typically is when you either go to band practice or when you go to play in a small room, like a real small bar or maybe a coffee house or something along those lines. So back to the whole Simmons versus the Yamaha there, the Simmons DA50. Like I said, I really don't recommend that product. Now, on the other hand, this Yamaha DRB15 is an excellent speaker. It's a 1,000-watt speaker. I've got a 15-inch speaker with a horn in it. It produces a great sound. I think that the only thing that I would recommend to go with that is, honestly, if you're going to use that as like a quote-unquote small PA in a small place, you probably ought to get two. Get a pair. If you're going to go to a situation where you're looking at like subs and stuff like that, well, you're playing at a place that already has a PA or should have a PA, and that's not, probably not something that you need to worry about getting yourself. But that kind of in between, where you're at band practice or you're jamming with some people, or maybe you're playing in a small place, you're going to need speakers. I recommend the Yamaha DRB15 or something along those lines. It's a powered speaker. Basically you just plug it in and turn it on, and that's it. You're good. So electronic drums, practicing, recording, playing out. What's the future of all this? And once again, purely opinion video. There's some really, really, really great products coming out, or that have been out for a while. There's a company called ATV. Just put out a drum set. It looks like an acoustic drum set. They've got a 4-piece version, and I believe either a 5 or 6-piece version. In addition to that, there's Jobeki, which is something that I'm looking really hard at, and something that I'm probably going to consider really hard in the future. And then there's also Drum Tech. Kind of looking at this, like I said, ATV, Jobeki, and Drum Tech. I really feel like these are great quality products, and they're very, very well made, very reputable companies, great customer service, and I really feel like that's kind of the future here, where you're going to have electronic drums, but they're not going to look like electronic drums. They're just going to look like an acoustic drum set, but basically all your drums are going to be triggers, and they're going to plug into a module of some kind, which is ultimately going to go via cable to the sound man, and that's going to be it. And what that's going to afford you is the ability to bring that stage volume down, because ultimately too, I think some people still don't quite like the look of electronic drums. I mean, I think there's different aspects. There's sound, there's aesthetics, there's all these different things, and I think the sound quality is improving tremendously. It has improved, it is improving, and it is going to continue to improve, and it's going to be a real force to reckon with in the future. Number one, and then number two, I think the aesthetics. I think that they're going to they're going to look essentially identical to an acoustic drum set, and so you know that situation is being taken care of, or is going to be taken care of. You know, so where does this leave me? You know, you've seen a couple of my videos. You know that I've got an acoustic drum set piled up over here in the corner, and I play that, and I've got this electronic drum set. I really like this electronic drum set, but I also, you know, I've taken it to band practice a couple of times. There's some aspects of that that I don't like. The biggest things that I don't like, if you remember going back to my acoustic drum set, I've got, it's compact. It's a 4-piece drum set. It's on DW ultralight hardware. Everything is I can set that thing up, I can set it up in 20 minutes. I can tear it down in 20 minutes. I can transport it in a Toyota Prius. It's nothing. Now, ultimately, I can transport this drum set in the Toyota Prius as well, but actually, in my mind, this is less portable. Even though these pads are obviously much smaller than a 10-inch, or I'm sorry, a 12-inch rack tom and a 14-inch floor tom and a 20-inch bass drum, this rack is not compact at all. I mean, I can fold it and do different stuff to it, but yeah, you know, I feel like when I put it in my car, I'm going to tear the upholstery, or I'm going to do something to mess up the car while I'm folding the rack back and forth, and the wiring, you know, for the wiring harness for the electronic drums runs through the rack. I feel like I'm going to tear up the wiring on the you know, on the wiring harness. When I pick it up, you know, basically the wires are dragging across the ground. I've got 1/4-inch cables basically dragging across the ground. It's not good. So I think the future, honestly, is something like a Jobeki kit, which is an electronic drum set. Looks like a full-size drum set, but it's actually an electronic drum set, and it's mounted to traditional stands. It doesn't have this huge, cumbersome rack. You know, it in my mind, at least in my mind, I think that it'll be easier to transport, and it'll kind of check all the boxes. It'll sound good, it'll look good, it'll be easy to transport, easy to work with, and bring the stage volume down. And two, I've got to say, I really like when I come home, this drum set's set up. I mean, basically all I do, flip one switch, module comes on, put on my headset, plug in my phone, and start playing. And so I don't like tearing this kit down and setting it up and moving it and all. It's just too cumbersome of a process. I look at this being more my home practice studio drum set, and that being my road kit, and ultimately, you know, maybe looking at something like Jobeki or something along those lines to use on the road. So anyhow, this for now at least wraps up electronic drums, electronic drumming, my thoughts, my opinions. A couple of channels I mentioned along the way: 65 Drums, Justin Greenwald, Mike Luke, both excellent video creators, lots of quality content. Please, by all means, go check out their channels if you haven't already. And you guys have an absolutely great day.